What's up, guys? Today we're going to do that Devlin and Goatman spotlight, and then afterwards I'll go through and do a little bit of balance talk as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump into the castle with these couple units just to compare them and see how they work in action. So let's jump into it. Obviously these will not work by themselves a lot of the time, especially the Devlin. Let's just jump into the first guy, who is going to be the Devlin. So he's 3 points. He is, I believe, 1 by 1 in terms of like the footprint. So that's very low points. He's very high damage, as you can see. If I get hit by 2 of these twice or by 4 of these, I will die 100% of the time. So let's kill these guys off before I die, and take a look at the one that's by himself so that I can kind of show him off a little bit better without dying. I'm going to bring him over here. As you can see, he's got an AoE attack to his attack. Basically, wherever his bomb blows up, if you walk away from it just a little bit, it will still hit you. That being said, his range seems to be a little bit off. Sometimes when you're far enough away from him as he's walking up, he'll shoot, but he won't actually be within range to hit you. Right there is one example. The same problem goes that if he doesn't hit you, let's bring him out so I can do this and show it off. If you walk around him, sometimes, maybe not always, it was happening before, yeah, like that, where he will overshoot you, and the projectile just keeps going. So it's not really the same as like a Snotter where it ends where your hero is. It'll keep going unless it actually hits you straight up, just like on top of you. So basically his range has to be mid-range. Like, he can't really shoot long range, and he can't really shoot short range unless he hits directly on top of you. That's a couple of his downsides, as well as his hit points obviously being a 3-point unit is a downside, but it's the highest damage dealing unit in the game for 3 points, even up to probably around, I don't even know if a Smelly Archer will deal enough damage on headshot. I guess Bear Trap, Smelly Archers deal about similar damage, especially if you have Corrosive Mine debuff on you, but he really hits about as hard as a Zeke on headshot. One of their bolts, even 1.5 of their bolts sometimes. Anywhere between 800 to 1200 damage per shot on one of these guys. Very high damage. So what do I think he could be used for? I do think he will be useful. Whether or not you want to invest in him early, because he may be kind of like a flavor of the month thing, where what I'm most worried about with the Devlin is that he seems a little bit overpowered right now. And what could happen is that people are going to invest materials, and they're going to buy material packs to try to get a bunch of these guys early on, and Ubisoft will go through and do a rebalancing of them and possibly make them underpowered. It's happened before, and I don't want to see that happen, because people could invest real money into trying to get the materials and then be let down when they go through and nerf him. So that's something that you'll have to keep in mind if you're deciding to do that, as well as just deciding to spend materials on him in general, as I do think he's going to get hit with a nerf at some point in his lifetime. I think he can be used for a couple purposes. He could be used with other support units as just a overall like sustained damage group, or he could be used with a bunch of those guys, 4 or 5 of them, along with, you know, something that throws you into a room, maybe a Smelly Archer that stuns you, and then all of those guys hit and you're instantly dead. I think those are the 2 ways that he's going to be used for the most part. Both of them will require you to have at least 5 of them to work, and more would be just beneficial. So it's going to be a pretty big investment if you want to use those guys in your castle. You can throw 1 or 2 of them in, just as like support units, like not support, but like added DPS for the 3 points. I don't think there's any group that you put them in that's going to be really bad with those guys in them. So that's pretty much it about the Devlin. Moving on to the Boomerang Goatmen. These ones are pretty easy as well. You can see basically, I think I'm going to just kill one of them off so you can see their damage by themselves. So their range is definitely mid-range, the same as the Devlin. It's pretty similar to the Devlin's range. It's not a long-range unit. He works a little bit better close range, and he's going to hit you going out and going in for anywhere between like 300 and 600 damage. It's relatively easy to dodge these boomerang shots, but if you are in a corridor like this, it makes it a lot more difficult. But if you're in an open room, it's pretty easy to dodge them, even if there's a bunch of them attacking you. Although once you get up to around 5 or 6 of them coming from different angles, it does get a little bit harder, and more or less you just have to move backwards rather than trying to sidestep them. This is another unit that has really high damage for a 3-point cost. It's not quite as high as the Devlin. I think this guy has less hit points than the Devlin, or very similar hit points to the Devlin as well. So again, weaknesses would be that it's a mid-range unit. It is quite a bit better at shorter range than the Devlin is, because it can hit you going forward and going back. So if he were to move right here, his on the backward trend, basically, his boomerang can kind of curve around and hit you, even though you're in a position where it wouldn't hit you going forward. His low hit points are going to be a bad thing about him as well, but again, it's probably the same general consensus as the Devlin, where he's a good unit to use in death traps and in kind of like short segmented areas. You know, something like that I have up here with these smaller rooms like this, where you have a bunch of barricades and you just kind of force the person in there and make them take a bunch of damage, as well as, you know, springboard trap into like some sort of a stun, and then a bunch of boomerangs coming and hitting you both times can easily kill someone. So let's go forward to the Bola Strike Goatman. This one's a little bit more weird. So obviously he's a snare. He's got some bugs. I don't know if they're actually bugs or if they're intended, but basically this projectile just keeps on going. However, if you move back enough, it won't hit you, no matter where you stand. It doesn't actually have as much range as it seems like it. It does have slightly more range than like throwing it to the hero. You know, you can move back a little bit and it will still hit you. There's some great things about this guy. Basically, he does a lot more damage than the Punch Drunk Hungerbot, which is probably the thing that you have to compare him to the most. He stuns you for about 3 seconds, and each one of those seconds you tick about 200 damage. You get a block chance on each one of those, so against archers it's a little bit less effective because they have high block chance. As well as, I believe, if you get hit by it and then you roll, never mind, it didn't actually work. I was going to think that if you got hit by it and then you rolled, you'd have that high block chance, so you could probably block at least 2 of the ticks of damage. His hitbox as well is a little bit funky, where if you just sidestep it slightly, even though it kind of touches your character because it's such a large area, the hitbox is actually really just in the center of that Bola Strike, which kind of makes sense. At first I thought this guy was really amazing because of the enormous projectile. I thought his hitbox was going to be a lot larger than the Hungerbot, but as it is right now, it seems to be a little bit smaller, because the Punch Drunk Hungerbot, which I'll show off a little bit later, the fist is pretty big. So, and it hit no matter where you hit on that fist, it will slow you down. So I don't know if I said this, but it's about 3 seconds for the Bola Strike to snare you, whereas the Hungerbot's about 4 to 4.5. It seems like a little bit longer, but the Goatman has a lot more damage associated to him, and as well he has a little bit lower hit points, about 200 lower hit points as well. Not really a big deal because both of them are going to die fairly quickly, especially with the double damage buff that everybody got. Anything else to say about him? I don't really think so. I think specifically he will be better in situations where you have the person stunned and then you want to keep them snared after the stun. Basically, if you set it up so that he automatically hits, he's going to be the best and better than the Punch Drunk Hungerbot, because you're going to be dealing that extra damage. So if you're going for like a kill zone, I think the Goatman will be better. If you're going for more of like a scrappy sort of like battle where the person's going to be rolling around and trying to dodge things, the Hungerbot's probably slightly better, but they're both going to be pretty terrible because the Hungerbot's pretty easy to dodge as well. That is just so slow. For people who weren't around back when Hungerbots were good, like, this is just so bad. It's like disgraceful. I mean, there's no way for me to really explain it to you other than the fact that, like, this Hungerbot hook, after I dodge this next one, would go out to about here before. Like, that thing would be extremely long, and it would snap out there like as fast as a Zeke shot almost on headshot. That thing used to be so good, and they nerfed him so heavily into the ground that it's sad even looking at this guy anymore. He just looks so pathetic. How like long and slow this hook was used to be at like its tier 1 ability. Like when you first got this guy, that's how long it was, and then at tier 4 it would go out to about here, and then at tier 7 it would go out to about here, and it would be faster each upgrade as well. I still even remember it was like level 20 where you got the initial hook out to about here, and then at level 32, back when castles could go up that far, it used to be a hook out to a little bit even farther than that. That guy used to be so much better than he is now. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts about those guys. I think that the Hungerbot could be better in certain situations, but for the most part, that extra 1 point difference is going to be a pretty big deal, especially if it allows you to fit an extra creature in, or a better creature, or whatever you want. I think the Bola Strike definitely has a place, but he is, I think he might start to overshadow the Hungerbot in terms of just dealing more damage. Being able to deal 600 damage versus about 150 to 200 is a pretty big deal, especially being 1 point lower. The only thing you're really giving up is the fact that the hitbox is slightly smaller on the Bola Strike, and the snare slightly shorter, and then his hit points are very slightly lower. It's between like 1400 Hungerbot and like 12 something on the Bola Strike. Goatman. Alright, so let's leave this. That's my overall spotlight and my thoughts on the guys. I have a couple of these Devlins in my castle right now. I think only one of them is actually in here, which is that one right there. If you need to see him a little bit more, maybe you can get to this point in my castle and take a look at him. Or if you have any more questions, you can throw them in the comments below. If you're like on the fence about actually buying these guys, I do think they're worth it right now. I'm just a little bit worried about the possible nerfs that might be incoming. So a little bit of balance talk beyond these guys specifically. The balance is in a pretty weird spot right now. It's pretty much kill or be killed in terms of creatures. Creatures are very high damage, but they're so easy to kill. With my DPS at about 2200, I can one-shot volley everything but bosses. I don't think there's any unit that I can't unless it's guarded by like a Defendatron, which is another thing that's going to probably start to come back, is a lot of these higher DPS creatures like Zeeks are going to be accompanied by Defendatrons almost always. This used to be the case, and then it kind of fell out a little bit, and it was more into like an AoE Defendatron on everything. I think you're going to see more bodyguard Defendatrons, as well as because you can have multiple specializations, right? So now I can have an AoE Defendatron guarding my groups like this that have a lot of trash mobs, and then I can have a bodyguard Defenatron for something like this where I want the Zeke to stay alive, but really the only thing I want is this Enrager Puppeteer to get off 1 Enrage on my Zeke, and then after that it's fine. Just let him try to deal his damage because it's really high. A couple units got nerfed pretty heavily, and so I'll go through the crafting menu and just kind of talk about each unit. Chicken and Derp I'm not even going to mention. Punching Cyclops, their damage got buffed pretty heavily. Is it going to make them worthwhile? I mean, the only way I could see these guys being useful right now is if you enrage them or used a bad dog to try to keep them stuck onto the person, and then you would have to try to use a bodyguard Defendatron to keep them alive. The problem with that is that he would be so quick after that that the Defendatron wouldn't be able to keep up, so it would kind of work against each other. Same problem that Cyclops is with Defendatrons have always had, where they're just a little bit faster than Defendatrons. You know, they have a medium movement speed, whereas these Defendatrons have very slow movement speed, so they get away from them too far, and then they break the link, and then they're kind of useless by themselves. Smelly Warrior Heavy-Handed. I haven't actually checked this guy, but I don't think he got nerfed in the way of damage, so he should be just about as good as before, except he does a little bit more damage now, and he's very easily one-shot volleyed. The good thing about these guys before is that they were able to survive a one-shot volley. That's definitely not the case anymore. So in order to have these guys, you'll probably have to have a Defendatron with AoE, an AoE ability to try to block off that volley. But if someone times it out correctly, or if they just have enough DPS, they'll be able to get through the Defendatron and the smaller trash mobs in one volley, which is pretty crazy. I think I'm very close to being able to do that, if not able to do that already. I'm not going to mention Snotters. These lower trash mobs are still probably very useless. They do deal higher amounts of damage, so if you can do something crazy... I mean, I guess there is something to say about derps right now, with upwards of 600 physical damage there. If you put them all in a smaller contained area and you lock someone in with them somehow, like if you get an attacker that's kind of stuck in with a bunch of derps and like a Defendatron and maybe a Enrager Puppeteer, even a Bad Dog, to try to get those guys to actually deal their damage, they can deal high DPS, but they're very easy to kill, so it's kind of a trade-off, I guess. Snotters, I've always had very easy times dodging them, even though they've worked for other people. I've seen people like put Snotters around a corner behind a wall somewhere, and the person comes around unsuspectingly and then just takes a face full of snot and just dies instantly. I mean, that will still work just fine. I've just never had any luck doing it in my own castles. I've never really tried, and I've never had a problem killing them off either. So I'm not really a fan of them. I'm more of a fan of using Snotters to pull aggro, for the most part. Split shot smelly archers, I think their DPS is going to be too low for the amount of damage that they deal. Or split shot should this sounds like it's shoots arrows in rapid succession. Sounds like it's headshot, but I'm pretty sure split shot is still the 3 different arrows. Or maybe they changed that in the last update. I don't really remember, but I don't think they'll deal enough damage. I think headshot and trap archers are still going to overshadow these guys. This is actually an interesting one. Displacer Stairmasters. So the good thing about these is when they start taking damage, they will teleport outside of, say, a volley. So you can have them all grouped up, and then as they take damage, and the hero's like standing, if you guys can imagine, the hero's standing there, there's like 4 of these guys right here, they throw out a couple of their beams, the attacker launches a volley or some other AoE on them, and then they all teleport to different areas of the room and they start attacking. And then you have to go and try to like chase these guys down while they're dealing their 1200 magic damage. So obviously not going to be that high, it's going to be somewhere around the range of 5 to 700 probably after resistances. But the fact that they teleport and they're actually able to keep themselves alive is a pretty big deal. I think these guys could see some use because they're going to be high damage and going to be able to use them as like sustained damage. They're better in like medium-sized rooms. They're not quite as good as in smaller-sized rooms, but they're still okay. They actually used to be really good against knights as well. I don't know how they will be against knights now, but I'm having personally some trouble keeping knights out of my treasure room. At least with this defense, but I don't know. They have really high resistances now, so it's hard to actually make them use potions. Alright, the Defendatrons are going to be pretty much the same thing. They're probably going to be even more useful now because the DPS on attackers is so high. Alright, Stab Assassins. I don't think they quite make the cut. They deal 200 or so damage per tick after resistances are factored in. They are only 2 points now. I've seen some people trying to use them. I've also seen some really cool use of them pre-open creation, like you enter a room and behind the wall you have a Cyclops that's on dash, and then you have a bunch of Stab Assassins. The Stab Assassins see you, the Cyclops sees you, they start spinning, the Cyclops pushes you into them, and then they deal their damage. This was back when the Cyclops had a larger stun. A larger stun associated with them. It looks like there's actually some bugs with the specialization tooltips, because dashing Cyclops, this one is the charge one, but it says that he attacks with a 3-punch combo, which is not correct. So there might be a few bugs with this. That's probably why the Smelly Archer looked a little bit weird there. Vamps, I think it was Too Shy to Chat. I was talking to him when he was streaming one day, and he threw a bunch of these guys into his castle and tried out these guys plus a Enrager Puppeteer and a Bad Dog, and see if they could deal enough damage. To me, it didn't seem like they would be useful enough. They deal some good amounts of damage, but they can't quite stick to a hero. Like, they're good at dashing to a hero, but if you're constantly moving, they don't really hit you. Hardly ever. And that's basically the way that you deal with them. You see Vamps, you aggro them, you launch a volley on top of yourself, and then you just walk around in a circle, and they don't ever really deal their damage. And they'll all die to the volleys by themselves. You don't have to do anything else besides that. So that's why they're a problem. General Klunkenstein, he was really good in the lower levels, but now he just doesn't have enough hit points to really stand toe-to-toe with anything. And his abilities are just going to be a little bit worse now, considering he spawns chickens that are going to do absolutely nothing. And then, like, the pounce is nice, and I don't remember what else he does. He does some, like, whirlwind attack. His damage is going to be probably decent, but I just don't think he's going to be worth it for 8 points at the moment. All right, Jimbo. This one I believe is, I don't know what this one is. This isn't Personal Bubble, but this isn't Heavy-Handed. I guess it has to be Griefer, but I don't think Griefer is actually a thing anymore. At least that's what I heard. I don't know. They removed a few things, like Eyeline is no longer in the game, even though it was in the patch notes, which is kind of weird. I don't really know what specialization this is, but I'll talk about Jimbos in general. Heavy-Handed got nerfed pretty heavily. The old ones used to do 1,600 damage. They now do around 800 to 1,000. So if they used to, before this patch, the old ones used to do 1,600 damage. If that was flat, just a double, and of course Mighty Quest crashes because that happens all the time. I'm going to start loading that back up, but I'll talk about it as I'm going forward and logging in. So Heavy-Handed used to do 1,600 damage before the update, and that would make it do about 3,200 after the update. From what I was told, I haven't actually tested it, but from what I was told, it is about 2,000 damage now. So they nerfed it from about like 30 to 40% of his damage, which makes him a lot less appealing, although he still deals a good amount of damage. If you do put him in like an area where you want to just deal a ton of damage to the person, it'll still work out. It'll still do about the same thing. My defense has been having a hard time against mages, as you can see. But yeah, let me go back to defense mode. So yeah, heavy-handed Jimbos are a little less appealing, but they deal more damage than they used to. It's just they die a little bit quicker as well. Let's go back into defense crafting and get back to where I was before. Alright, awesome. So I personally, in my castle, have been using Personal Bubble Jimbos because I want to try to keep them alive a little bit longer. It's not really working out. They're dying pretty quickly anyway. But when they do hit, these guys hit for about 800 damage, the Personal Bubbles, which is pretty high. And if you enrage them, they're pretty good at sticking to the target. That's what I've been using currently. Heavy-handed Jimbos will still work, but by themselves, probably not. They're going to need like a Defendatron on them or something. To keep them alive a little bit longer, I think. Pete Poundmore, I think this guy is just too clunky to be useful right now. Maybe with charge he can deal his damage. I don't know the damage that on charge that will actually be there. He'll deal a ton of damage if he gets up to you and does his 3-punch combo. That's true, but every time that I've seen him as in a castle, I headshot him once and he's dead. And he's just such a big target that it's really easy to deal damage to him, as well as everyone having at least Spiral Shot or Bear Traps. He's probably never going to get close enough to actually deal his damage, and his damage is like just low enough where 16 points doesn't make it worth it. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be useful. Let's see, Pew Pew. This is basically the elite version of Stairmaster Teleport. Again, same basic principle. I think that maybe Stairmasters will be better than this guy because you can have a lot more of them, so it'll be harder to track down every single one of them. But this guy does more damage, so it's really up in the air. I haven't tested these guys, but I think he'll be somewhat useful. Zeke, this is the 3 shots in a cone, the one that I'm using right here. He does about 800 to 1,000 damage per hit. He has 3 different arrows. If he shotguns you from point-blank range, he can easily kill someone instantly. That's kind of why I'm using him. He used to be useful. He used to be more useful than the headshot and the bear trap variant, but he got an attack speed nerf a couple patches ago, and that was mainly why he stopped being all that useful. Within rage, he still can get a few hits though. I've actually had him kill a couple people in this castle. One, I remember someone got shotgunned right here, and then someone got hit like just by a random arrow and was already low life and got killed there. He's decent at sustained damage, but is he better than bear traps or headshot? They're both kind of about the same. They just are in different. They're different specializations overall. I mean, they do different things. Bear traps, I always liked Smelly Archers over Zeke's because for 12 points it's not really worth it. But then Nowadays, bear trap smelly archers only have one bear trap, and these guys should still have three. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Alright, puppeteers are exactly the same. They don't have any extra damage. They only have the same hit points. I mean, there's no reason to actually buy these guys if you have the specific specialization you want on your older ones, because you can't actually change your old specializations right now. But if you have the right specialization, you can use those, and they'll be exactly the same, just as good. I'm pretty sure. I don't think that they messed with the aura. Really, the only thing they did is give the new ones double damage, so that's the only difference. Ground Punch Cyclopses. I actually saw someone with Ground Punch Pete Poundmores dealing a lot of damage in like a kill zone environment. They do about 1,600 damage, the Pete Poundmores on Ground Slam. These guys probably deal about half that, I would imagine, at about 800, maybe a little bit lower than that even. I don't think they're really all that great, especially because if these guys were the level 32 variant, where basically those guys could attack from like right here, and they kind of like threw out a shockwave when they hit, and could hit you from farther range than you would normally get hit by these guys. That doesn't happen anymore, so I don't really think that they're all that worth it. But other people might. They're not terrible. I mean, they're alright. These trap smelly archers got hit with a pretty big nerf this patch. I don't know if it was intended or if it was a bug. I want to think that it was a bug because we removed like pretty much every tier effect from every creature, and I'm hoping those come back. They only launched down one bear trap instead of three. That's a pretty big change. It was not listed in the patch notes, that's why I'm hoping that it's a bug. I'm not going to get into bosses. I don't know. Dur's good. I mean, the rest of these guys, they do their thing. You know, Mr. Spicely has a really good stun if you have him turned the opposite direction. Terroraptor Overlord has a stun, but it's not really that great. Captain Clubbage has that Lashing Flames ability. That's okay. Dur has a knockdown for every one of his attacks. He might have all 3 lives now as well. That's another thing that could be a bug and might get changed, because he used to have 3 lives, but they changed that in a previous update. And when I went through, I was leveling my knight, and I went through Dur's castle, and he actually had 3 lives. I don't know if it was because it was his castle that he had 3 lives, or if his 3 lives are just back in general. I have not tested it. I haven't seen someone using this in a normal castle. If somebody has this guy already bought a new variant of him, check to see if he has 3 lives. If he does, it could be a bug, because of the fact that I feel like a lot of these guys, they used an older database when they were going through and changing things. I could get into that a little bit more, but there's not really all that much reason. This derp right here at level 30, 1,070 hit points. The derp right here has 950. They got like a 10% or a 20% health increase a couple patches ago, and it doesn't seem like it's there anymore for a lot of these creatures. That's why I'm thinking that there's an older database being used here, and hopefully that will get updated at some point, but who knows. The same as like traps. Tier 3 costs 5, power cost is 5. For rotating flame trap 3, it's supposed to be 4, as all the old ones are. So that's another thing that got changed a couple patches ago as well. I'm not going to get into that too much more. I just want to throw that out there so that everybody knows, and I just want to get through a couple more of these. We went over Bullet Goatman. Hungerbots, I mean, I talked about Hungerbots. I'm pretty disappointed in them right now. Scorpios, they get one-shot volleyed by me, and it's not really worth devoting a Defenatron to them. For 12 points, I don't think it's really worth it. Their effects aren't that great, but they are good in conjunction with certain units like Headshot Zeeks and stuff like that. I talked a little bit about Pete Poundmore already. Could be one of the better variants of him, though. This does high damage, about 1,600 to hit, as I said before. Dr. Skull, same basic thing as the Puppeteer. There's no real reason to buy the new ones unless you need a different specialization. Battering Rams are going to be a little bit worse than before because they get volleyed and take too much damage. It used to be that they would get volleyed and then they would get enraged and be able to charge at you. Now they'll get one-shot volleyed every time. Same problem with Mega Buttons unless the person doesn't have enough DPS to one-shot volley them. But they should be able to one-shot headshot them. Unless I've seen a couple people changing their gear out so that they have somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 hit points, and they have the DPS that they used to have. Because it's basically the same, but they get more hit points, so it kind of lessens the blow on both sides. where they'll be killing things just about as quickly as before, but they'll be taking more damage. So it's basically the same balance as before, but you know, they just have more hit points. I actually went the opposite direction, where now I have less hit points and way more DPS, because I wanted all. I mean, you can see my gear over here. I used to have about 36 to 3800 DPS before, or health rather, and I switched that all out for straight DPS up items, and I'm up to 2200 DPS. I actually started using a different bow because it gave me a big DPS increase. I don't know if I have my old bow still. It was just a blacksmith one, but this bow gave me like 300 DPS increase, so I figured it was going to be worth it in the long run for abilities and stuff like that. Alright, regular spiders aren't going to be all that useful. Ominous Orb, unfortunately when I was thinking about old databases, I was hoping that that 10x damage bug was back in the game and these things were going to do about 500 damage a tick. Now how it is they do about the damage they used to do. So they got nerfed a little while ago, and now they deal about the same amount of damage they used to do, which could make them useful again, but because there's a damage increase on heroes overall, I don't know if it's really going to be useful. The only way that these guys are going to be useful is the old way of having two bodyguarded Stairmasters, having two Defendatrons, two Stairmasters, and putting them in a room, small segmented area. Alright, Elite Vamp. She's got the same problems as the original Vamp, is basically if you run away in a circle, she'll never hit you. A little bit more health, so she'll be able to maybe tank through a volley depending on DPS. She's not bad. She deals, I think, around 1000 damage. I don't know, 1200 maybe? I'm not sure exactly. I haven't tested her, but that's my thought. This is the shielded Jimbo. Like I said, he's pretty good, 800 damage a hit, somewhere 800 to 1000. This is the headshot variant of the Zeke, obviously going to be high damage, but I think he got nerfed the same as heavy-handed Jimbo, so he might not actually be useful anymore. That'll have to be tested. I haven't tested it yet. Mega Muttons, their fire didn't seem to get much of a damage increase. I don't think they're really useful right now. The same reason as like certain Pete Poundmore specializations I don't think are all that useful is because they're just a huge target and they never really get to their mark. If they do end up getting someone charged, the stun effect is pretty nice. That's about the only thing. Explodifier and Mr. Boom Boom both have the same problems, that they got an AI rework pre-open creation. They used to be able to release bomblets around corners, and that was great, but now they're pretty low range. They have to make sight with the hero before they can start launching bomblets out, which makes them not very good. They never really deal much damage, hardly at all. And their bomblets are so low hit points now, because everyone has double DPS, that it's very easy to just kill them off and start going after the Mr. Boom Boom itself. And then Webmasters are going to be still pretty good units. They'll get killed a little bit quicker, but at the same time, their Leap Strike makes it hard to AoE volley them, because they'll be coming at all different angles at different times as well, so the extra damage on them is going to be nice as well. And the Crushulator is a unit that I've never really liked. It's just a tanky unit. There's no real reason to have it in your castle. I mean, it doesn't defend anything. The Defendatron pretty much works better than it in almost every way, in my opinion. And that is all of the creatures. If I talk about traps, I mean, obviously the new variant of these rotating flame traps I think are not worth it. The 20% increase for the 20%, I guess, increase in power cost makes it not really worth it. I would still just use the old variant if you're going to use them, and if they ever do get changed, they'll be good traps. Corrosive Mines, they got like a 10% increase in damage. That's just good overall. I mean, for the most part, the only thing to really talk about is the Ballista, where the Ballista is going to be a little bit lower damage, but attack speed increase. So the only way I could think this is better or on par with the old ones is if you intermix them. Basically, if you use new and old ballista traps, I think that would be pretty good, because they'll be attacking at different intervals, so it'll be harder to dodge them. It'll be harder to find a spot where you can actually auto attack in between ballista shots. You can't really time them out as easily. Same thing with spike traps. If you use old and new spike traps in a line, they won't be or they shouldn't be where you can walk across and you know exactly what panel's going to be active and what panel's not going to be active. It's going to be all different because it's going to have different speeds on the active panels. There's not really much to say about the traps in general. And I think that's pretty much it. So that is my talk on balance. If anyone has any questions specifically, especially to like the Devlin or the Goatman, because I've probably played around with them the most since they're new units. That's really where I've put most of my crafting materials. Right now I really just need some basic crafting materials. If I go to my crafting material page, I need these things, these eagle souls. That's the main thing that I need right now, I think. I have actually quite a bit of danger oxide, mostly from tombstones. And obviously I need a little bit more of the epics, but that's only for bosses, so I'm not really too worried about that. You can easily make a defense without a boss. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.